Aaliyah and Lorraine. Lorraine's going to talk to you about two facets. The first one is about how she was able to become creative for Aaliyah's life. Lorraine was one of the key family members. I met Lorraine my second day up at the DDD central office. I came there as just a new person on board, as your self-direction didn't even have its name or anything. We didn't really know what we were doing, and Lorraine was one of the family members that was there kind of leading the charge, saying, if you gave us the dollars, we could do it better. So she's here to talk about that piece and what it is that Aaliyah does during the day. She's also going to talk to you a little bit about, she and I travel together every fall and spring for, I guess, what, 22 nights together, doing the Life After 21 sessions. So she works at the Family Support Center of New Jersey, and so she's going to talk to you a little bit about what it is she does in that hat as well. So Lorraine and Aaliyah.
Thank you. The transition from school to adult life is fraught with anxiety, is it not? Just shake your head. Just when we figured out the education system, it's time for us to move on to a completely new system. Understanding the adult service system does not happen overnight. It is constantly changing, as some of our panelists talked about, more so than the education system. Therefore, it is on our shoulders to seek out pertinent information for our sons and daughters. We know that there's a lot of information out there, and the key is how do we filter that so that we are honing in on the specific information that we know is pertinent for our sons and daughters. So today I have the privilege of sharing with you both my personal and professional perspectives. So I will start with my personal. I have with me today my beautiful, might be slightly biased, 28-year-old daughter. She gives me permission to share that because she wears it very well. And she's lived through the days where inclusive classrooms were not the first option because of her level of disability. My first level of involvement with disability-related issues was fighting with the school system, and I'm sure I share that with many families. For parents, this is where we learn the importance of educating ourselves. The more information we have, the better we are able to advocate for programs as well as services for our children. By the time Aaliyah was in her last years of high school, I had developed an excellent working relationship with the school professionals. I would like to think it's because they saw me as a resource and not just a pain in the neck that wasn't going to go away, but maybe it was a little bit of both. I wasn't sure what life beyond school was going to look like for Leah. So I visited day programs with school professionals. And I remember, still to today, the sadness I felt when I saw a program in which Aaliyah would be sitting next to a 65-year-old man because they had similar needs. And the thought of her in a program that was more of a nursing home type of setting was not something I was comfortable with. Thankfully, it was the school professionals that were the first to say, she can't come here. So at that time, I was also involved with DDD and working on what self-directed service options could look like, as Trish mentioned. We were a group of families that thankfully DDD had pulled together to have this discussion. I think that we're very fortunate as families to be able to volunteer our time on various topics, and wherever possible, make no mistake, we benefit greatly from those opportunities as well. So I asked the school to help me develop what a community-based individualized program could look like for my daughter. Transition is a process, and we know it just doesn't happen overnight. Chelsea talked about it. It's not going to just happen. In New Jersey, we know it starts at 14 or earlier if deemed appropriate. We also heard about that, starting as early as possible, doing as much as we can repetition. So in school, Aaliyah started at the age of 12. And what we did was we developed a resume of in-school job opportunities that she had explored, as well as community-based activities. So developing this resume allowed us a format in which we could capture what had been tried, what worked, and what didn't work for her. Aaliyah participated in the graduation exercises with the peers that she had been in school with since 5th grade. At that time, we did not enter back into the high school building, but worked with a provider agency to move to a completely community-based program. The incentive for the school was that each year leading up to her 21st birthday, the cost would decrease. Our goal was to bring the cost as close to what DDD would allocate for day services as possible. So in doing so, we were self-directing before we knew it had a name, and because it just made sense for us to do so. What worked well for us was having the support of professionals, from the superintendent of the child study team to the case manager as well, from the superintendent of the schools to the child study team case manager. Although we believed it was the right approach for Aaliyah, we got that buy-in because we could present it as a cost-saving incentive. I remember going to the superintendent of schools and asking him to tell me how much it was costing the school to provide supports for Aaliyah. And I'm sure it's no surprise in this room that the transportation alone was over $20,000. That included the wheelchair lift vehicle, obviously the aid on the bus, and so that cost alone was around that. The education services was more than $60,000, including the OT, PT, speech that she received. So there was definitely an incentive for the school to help us move that closer to what we found out was going to be around $26,000 max at the time. That to me was devastating to plan for how we do that. And I knew at that time I did not want to have to worry about that in an overnight situation. She couldn't possibly go from receiving all of these support services in the school building to literally being on the street. And so what we did was we worked very closely with the school system and the provider agencies. Families struggle is further compromised by not understanding some of this information. So once again, I have to reiterate the importance of seeking out, actively seeking out information. What also worked well for us was having a DDD provider willing to contract with the school system. We heard from Barbara. Barbara talked about the relationship her agency has cultivated with the schools. It is key. We're seeing more and more provider agencies developing relationship with school districts. There are IEP goals that have to be developed, that have to be implemented in a community-based setting, as well as accountability factors that must be addressed. So again, we're seeing more DDD providers that are being involved with school districts. What we recognize in school and continue to struggle with is identifying opportunities and activities within the community to foster meaningful day activities. This is ongoing, and in New Jersey it changes with our seasons. And we heard a little bit about the seasons and how that affects some of the self-directed options that we're able to create. So thankfully, to date, there are more enrichment programs available through DDD qualified providers. Ashley's House is one that we've heard of today. There are many more DDD qualified providers that are now providing services in response to this need. So Aaliyah wakes up each day with a sense of purpose in her life. There's somewhere that she needs to be. And people who share similar interests is where she hangs out. She's recognized each year by Catholic Charities at their volunteer luncheon for the work she does at their thrift shop. She also volunteers at Warren County Community Prevention Resources on their drug awareness and prevention programs. She receives sensory integration to increase her muscle tone and enjoys loud music and meeting new people. So Aaliyah's week, Aaliyah's life is spent partially in service to others. She's always going to be on the receiving end of the system. And therefore, it's important to us as a family. Again, we heard from Chelsea talk about how they incorporated their family values in what her life looks like. For us, everyone needs to volunteer and give back on some level, and Aaliyah doesn't get a pass on that. So I will conclude my remarks with my professional experiences. Self-direction is not an easy road. What you've heard from the panelists today is we typically choose this option because what we're looking for doesn't exist. You've heard from the panelists that the best options for them are self-direction, and they've committed to do the work in making sure that they continue to have meaningful outcomes for their sons and daughters. My work with the Family Support Center of New Jersey has me coordinating with Tricia and DDD trainings throughout the state for families that are planning for this transition from school to adult life. I meet many families statewide that have come to all of these workshops, like Kathy, and can literally present the information. Families have said to Trish and I, the fog is lifted, and I finally get it, because you have to hear this more than one time. It is extremely confusing, and again, it's constantly changing. So when families are able to come to different workshops and go to the person-centered thinking, go to essential lifestyle planning sessions, pieces of what they're looking for start to come together for them. And by the time they are ready to age out of the education system, they are in a much better position. Sadly, we also see many families that we're seeing for the first time a couple of months before they need to leave the education system. For them, this is devastating. This is overwhelming to try to, at that point, put it all together. So what I will share with you is that at 21, our children's disability doesn't go away. And it does require a lot of planning leading up into that time. Learning must occur as early as possible. We have to ask the questions. All too often, we have families that struggle with what questions should they be even asking. And it is extremely powerful when families come together at these training sessions, because we're talking. We're talking in the parking lot afterwards. We're talking during the sessions even, and it does connect families. This is empowering. Throughout our children's life, we will encounter medical, education, adult service professionals that'll come in and out of our lives. We are the constant, and we will continue to be the constant. Therefore, we must commit ourselves to educating ourselves on various topics that we will encounter. I will conclude with, this is one of the reasons that my work is my passion. Providing the information to families is extremely important. And as much as you've heard from everyone on this panel, there are so many other stories that I'm sure will also encourage you and empower you to make the choices that you need to make. This isn't something that any of us have done alone. It has taken the support of not only professionals, but other family members that have all led us to be here today. So I thank you for your time.